organizers, as we have gathered here to deliberate on the wildlife corridor issues in the country. We appreciate the immense dedication in terms of your time, but also the resources that you have afforded so far. I would like to take this opportunity once again to welcome you all to this very important forum. Distinguished participants, as we are aware, as a country, we have set aside about 32.5% of our land for wildlife conservation. We have so far 21 national parks, 29 game reserves, 23 game-controlled areas, 3 wetlands or Ramsar sites, but also 22 wildlife management areas. All these areas are very important, not only for wildlife conservation, but as such as they contribute immensely to our national economy, to the livelihood of our local people in the protected landscapes and sustainability. For instance, if you take some of the protected areas from the major water catchment areas in our country, but they also provide basic goods and ecosystem services to us as human beings. They regulate and support the good weather and climate, and without forgetting the presence of the diverse nature wildlife attractions, which are the ones which form the basis of our thriving tourism sector in our country. Distinguished participants, the protected areas and wildlife ecosystems, as you all know, are very well connected by wildlife corridors that allow the wild animals to move from one area to another, either in search of food, in search of salt licks, to use for breeding sites, for security, among other reasons. And you've heard the presentation of Dr. Kairuki, and I would not like to go in deep to many reasons for search of these wild animals. But in recent years, we've seen the blockage of these corridors and wildlife migratory routes due to human-induced pressures, which as such have accelerated the human-wildlife conflict incidences in our country. As such, the expansion of human settlements, the crop cultivation, but also the infrastructure developments in wildlife corridors have been the major reasons that have been leading to the blockages. And we have also, as I've indicated earlier, we've heard from the presentation by Tawiri. The protected areas can hardly exist as islands without wildlife corridors to allow for the passages of migratory wildlife species such as elephants. As we all know, animals need space and resources just like us. They've defined their path to allow their movements. The magnitude of human-wildlife conflict in Tanzania has been increasing, and particularly to the 88 districts countrywide. As such, the human-wildlife conflicts has been of great concern to the government. And for instance, if I take for the year 2018 to the year 2022, we've envisaged an average of 28,137 people who have been affected by wildlife, including loss of over 56,972 acres of crops in the field. But it has also been revealed that most of these incidences of the human-wildlife conflicts occur within the wildlife corridors. The government of Tanzania has taken measures and initiatives to avert the situation, including the implementation of the Human-Wildlife Conflict Management Strategy of the year 2020 to protect the humans, but also their properties. I would like to assure you that the government of Tanzania is very determined and has been responsive to console the victims of the human-wildlife conflict incidences. And I'm saying consolation because we can never compensate the human life. Through the Consolation Program between 2018 to 2022, approximately 5.5 billion shillings has been used to console our victims in accordance with the Wildlife Conservation Regulations of 2011. Despite these government efforts, still the conflicts between humans and wildlife have continued to increase, justifying that the current interventions need to be relooked in order to strike the practices that can promote sustainable coexistence between people and wildlife in the country. The payments given to victims cannot be compared, as I said, to the loss or damages caused by wildlife, and does not as such ultimately address the core problem of the human-wildlife conflicts. Distinguished participants, following this situation, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Tourism has therefore developed the Wildlife Corridors Assessment Prioritization and Action Plan of the year 2022 to 2026, where 61 wildlife corridors have been identified across various ecosystems in the country. And out of these 61 wildlife corridors, 20 wildlife corridors have been prioritized for the first phase of the action plan due to the ecological significance, but also the imminent threat level for disappearance. Therefore, to embark on this journey, the Ministry of Natural Resources and Tourism, in collaboration with some of our conservation partners, including those who are present here today, we are launching this annual Wildlife Corridor Forum that will spearhead the restoration of the prioritized wildlife corridors in the country. And that is why we're here today. And I am very optimistic that this move will better guide us towards finding a lasting solution for the human-wildlife coexistence, but will also promote the sustainable local livelihoods through the wildlife corridor restoration and management. Distinguished participants, the reduction of human-wildlife conflicts will contribute to the well-being of our people, but will also strengthen conservation. Wildlife corridors, when functioning, present lots of opportunities to our people, but also to our nation at large. Opportunities to invest in wildlife-based ventures such as ecotourism, beekeeping, and other related sectors will also be present. Carbon trading has also been emerging as an economically viable sector or investment to our rural communities, but also for the wildlife corridors, and form an appropriate investment area opportunity in this new venture. Distinguished participants, I therefore wish to reiterate that wildlife corridors are also found in village lands, but the process of securing these areas does not involve the change of land tenure systems. The land will still remain to the local communities through their village governments, and local communities should therefore take advantage of the presented opportunities while still adhering to the set plans for land uses and management in their villages, so as to pave ways for corridors, as well as promoting the coexistence for people and wildlife. Distinguished participants, this forum has been made possible through the generous support from our different stakeholders, and therefore kindly allow me to recognize the Ministry of Natural Resources itself and Tourism through our Wildlife Division, the USAID to Uhifadhi Mali Asili Program, Frankfurt Zoological Society, and UNDP IWT project. I would also like to take the opportunity to appreciate the technical support that has been provided by the African Wildlife Foundation, AWF, WWF Tanzania, the Nature Conservancy TNC, GIZ, and Wildlife Conservation Society, WCS, among others. And lastly, I would like to once again take others who have not been mentioned, and we continue to seek your support and partnership towards the protection of our wildlife corridors. Distinguished participants, the experience shows that efforts to secure, protect, and sustain wildlife corridors requires long-term engagement with communities and agencies involved. I would also like to encourage continuous collaborative efforts among the partners and would like to call upon development partners for their financial and technical support. I understand that USAID has committed to support the efforts to help securing 7 out of the 61 corridors through the Uhifadhi Maliasili project. Asanteni sana, and we quietly thank you so much. I would also like to encourage continued support beyond the 5 years, and I believe we'll continue to partner and secure our wildlife corridors. And lastly, before I conclude, I would like to highlight some few key messages that I think you should take away. Number one, let us continue to monitor the implementation of the National Human Wildlife Corridor Strategy and prevent the encroachment of the wildlife corridor, as the human encroachment, as we know, lead to wildlife conflicts between our wildlife and humans. And therefore, as you've seen, this has led to the encroachment also in our human settlements and destruction also of our crops. But also secondly, let us put visible signboards so that our people can identify that the wildlife corridors which have been designated as such, so that they can be aware and understand. But also let's continue for the public awareness and education in our communities so that they understand the importance of wildlife corridors protection and what they should do as their part. But also, firstly, let us continue to engage with our village leaderships, but also our district leadership, so that they can see the importance of preparation of the village land use management plans, without forgetting the Ministry of Land, and I know you are present here. I know for once, as for this year, there is a budget that has been allocated for the preparations of the village land use plan. So it's important that through this forum, you can designate the villages that are emanating in those 61 wildlife corridors, which can also be given prominence and priorities, because the funding is already there through the preparation of the village land use plan. So kindly go through our list of the villages that are passing through the 61 wildlife corridors first to make the priority as such. And for this one, I'll take it up also with the Minister for Land and the Prime Minister to see how this can better be managed. And lastly, I would like to seek the indulgence of our local governments to make sure they protect for the village land use plan that has already been in place, to make sure that they are protected, they are there too, they are respected, and they are also followed. Otherwise, there is no use to have the village land use plan if there's nothing that has been done, if there is no protection, if the community are not aware of those land use plan and the demarcations that have been made so far. Lastly, I believe you'll have a favorable outcome towards this National Wildlife Corridor Forum, but also I believe you have fruitful deliberations. And lastly, I believe and expect that it will lead to pledges, to commitments, but also to further support towards the other remaining, I can say 11 corridors, but still we'll be very grateful if the partners can also go beyond the 20 wildlife corridors to be able to capture all the remaining 61 critical wildlife corridor. Distinguished participants, as we have just met towards this first National Wildlife Corridor Forum, for the first time, I expect that we'll come up with constructive ideas and strategies that will continue to enhance the restoration of the prioritized wildlife corridors in our country. Having said so, kindly allow me to declare that this first National Wildlife Corridor Forum is officially opened and launched. Asanteni sana na karibuni sana. And lastly, since this wildlife forum is not yet, how can I say, institutionalized or legal, towards the proposed amendments that we have in our Wildlife Act, kindly go through it. How can we protect it to make sure that it's sustainable, but to make sure that it has a high level participation, perhaps towards the level of the top 3 of our national leadership, to be the leaders of the forum. It's fine, you can have the officials forum, but it needs to be escalated up for well coordination, but also follow-ups, and to have success in your forum and the outcomes. I thank you once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, our guest of honor. It does not need to dilute. I think the speech was very clean, very direct, and loaded. Madam Guest of Honor, if you may allow just 2.5 minutes, so that at least most of us who are here know how you compile that report. It's an effort from a lot of us here, but as Dr. Kelly said, these guys have been walking almost all corridors. So just about 3 minutes. For those who have not seen it, you love it. And for those who have seen it already, you love it even more. So let's see, I can see that screen is on, that is on, but that one is not on. Yes. Maybe just, I hope and see what's in there. Yeah, let's just go on, please.
Taasisi ya Utafiti wa Wanyamapori Tanzania, TAWIRI, ni taasisi ya umma chini ya Wizara ya Maliasili na Utalii iliyoanzishwa kwa sheria namba 4 ya mwaka 1980. Lengo la taasisi ni kufanya, kuratibu na kusimamia utafiti wa wanyamapori nchini. Dira ya TAWIRI ni kufikia kiwango cha juu cha utafiti ili kuweza kutoa ushauri wa kitaalamu na wa kisayansi kwa wakati mwafaka kuhusu hifadhi na matumizi endelevu ya wanyamapori nchini. Dhamira kuu ya taasisi ni kuendesha na kusimamia utafiti wa wanyamapori nchini, kutoa takwimu na ushauri wa kitaalamu kwa serikali na mamlaka za uhifadhi kuhusu uhifadhi na usimamizi wa wanyamapori nchini. Utafiti wa wanyamapori ni muhimu katika uhifadhi na kuendeleza utalii. Maeneo mengi nchini ikiwemo Serengeti na Gombe ni matokeo ya utafiti kuhusu tabia za wanyamapori, ekolojia ya wanyamapori na kadhalika. Sote ni mashuhuda wa matukio makubwa ya ongezeko la watalii nchini baada ya filamu ya Tanzania The Royal Tour. Na kwa maana hiyo, taasisi imeendelea na jukumu lake la kuishauri serikali, mamlaka za usimamizi wa wanyamapori na Watanzania kwa ujumla kuhusu uhifadhi endelevu wa rasilimali ya wanyamapori. Baadhi ya tafiti zinazofanywa na taasisi ni pamoja na migongano ya watu na wanyamapori, magonjwa ya wanyamapori, ekolojia ya wanyamapori, ufugaji wa nyuki, kuhifadhi wanyamapori na matumizi ya teknolojia katika uhifadhi. Uandaji wa mipango mkakati ya kuhifadhi wanyama adimu ikiwamo tembo, faru, sokwe mtu, twiga na kuendelea. Kitaifa linalotekelezwa na TAWIRI. Serikali ya awamu ya 6 chini ya Rais Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, Rais wa Jamhuri ya Muungano wa Tanzania, kwa nyakati tofauti imekuwa ikiunga mkono juhudi za TAWIRI kwa kuboresha miundombinu itakayosaidia kuboresha utekelezwaji wa majukumu ya TAWIRI kwa viwango stahiki. Hii ikihusisha ununuzi wa magari mapya kwa ajili ya utafiti, ununuzi wa vifaa vya utafiti, majengo ya ofisi na kadhalika. Hii ndiyo TAWIRI. Karibu Tanzania, tuhifadhi kwa pamoja.
So, thank you very much. Madam Guest of Honor, I just thought that would be a nice appetizer for all of us. And just to mention, most of those people see in khakis, in field dresses. Some of them are here. They're all doctors. There's a chairman of the board is in there. The director general is there. They're all out there in the field doing a lot of work. Just before we move to the next step, I always like to use the example of a frog. I think some of you have heard of that. Let's not become frogs. There's that science which says if you take a frog and throw it in cool water, it will just swim, okay? But if you take it and throw it in a basin full of hot water, it will just go like, jump off. But if you take that basin, which is a metal basin, put it on a plate and start boiling it slowly, the frog will just enjoy and start swimming in there. And the first thing that will die is the brain. So the frog just sits there and just swims until it cooks completely. Do you understand that? Let us not become frogs. The world is heating up. We're losing our corridors, climate change impacts. We have all the science here. Mgeni rasmi nikiangalia hapa kuna vichwa fulani na viangalia hapa. Kina Profesa, kuna na Honyo wa UDSM, kuna na Nyahongo wa UDOM. Nikiangalia kuna vichwa vingine vimekaa sawa kweli. We have so many heads. We have youngsters who have a lot of science. I think compiling such a report, hebu angalia hawa, huyu bwana anaitwa Kadoshi huyu. Sijui anarukarukaje kama panzi. Nadhani kwenye maliasili he has done a lot of work. He's also the one who did this one. He's also the one who did this caption. Sasa press, you have una kazi ya kutupeleka mbali. Wananchi waweza kuelewa kitu kama hiki. Nikienda na ile buku langu ile la TAWIRI, watasema huyu msomi anatubabaisha tena. But just go with a very simple clip and do it. And on top when I talk of wananchi, I think we have somebody from WMA in here. I must decline to say, yeah. It's the only rescue for our corridors. Somehow bring them on board. If WMAs have challenges, let's help them and expand them. It's the only way that we can do it. Nadhani Mheshimiwa Waziri hapo naweza kuclaim a bit of nami niko huko kwa WMA. Lakini I'm very sure that with all these brains, we can work together through kamati ya kwako Madam Chair hapa, tukaweka vicorridors vyote ili tusiwe na conflicts. We have not even mentioned on my other interests in birds. Birds' corridors are known as flyways. Every year they fly from Northern Europe all the way to South Africa and back. And For example, white storks, they never get divorced. They stick to one. And these corridors are coming through us. So how do we match the wildlife corridors, the flyways, the stockways? I think in kupitia kamati yako, na congratulations to the ministry for spearheading this. So to conclude that, the minister talked of something very, very important on how we formalize the committee. And with the authority from the DW, I would like to invite one participant to take just a couple of minutes and just take us through what does it mean by having this in place. We're just requesting this participant to do a lift presentation, if you know what that means. Without notice, without what. Rose, please. Do you know what's a lift presentation? If you meet somebody very important, you press floor number 19 and you see the guy who wants to give you money. He's in the lift. How do you introduce yourself and break the ice? By the time you're on the 5th floor, you have known each other. So this is a lift presentation for you. How many minutes, madam? Just 3, like the video, yes. Thank you.
Asante sana mgeni rasmi. Asante sana, nimepewa nafasi ya kutoa highlight kidogo namna ya kuanzisha maeneo ya WMA na namna ambavyo huwa tunafanya katika maeneo mbalimbali.